Hello everybody, I'm back with another chapter from Little House in the Big Woods. And this chapter is about going to town. After the sugar snow had gone, spring came. Birds sang in the leafy hazel bushes along the crooked rail fence. The grass grew green again, and the woods were full of wildflowers. Buttercups and violets, thimble flowers, and tiny starry grass flowers were everywhere. As soon as the days were warm, Laura and Mary begged to be allowed to run barefoot. At first they might only run out into the woodpile and back in their bare feet. The next day they could run farther, and soon their shoes were oiled and put away, and they ran barefoot all day long. Every night they had to wash their feet before they went to bed. Under the hems of their skirts, their ankles and their feet were as brown as their faces. They had playhouses under the two big oak trees in front of the house. Mary's playhouse was under Mary's tree, and Laura's playhouse was under Laura's tree. The soft grass made a green carpet for them. The green leaves were the roofs, and through them they could see bits of blue sky. Pa made a swing of rough bark and hung it to a large, low branch of Laura's tree. It was her swing because it was in her tree, but she had to be unselfish and let Mary swing in it whenever she wanted to. Mary had a cracked saucer to play with, and Laura had a beautiful cup with only one big piece broken out of it. Charlotte and Nettie and the two little wooden men that Pa made lived in the playhouse with them. Every day they made fresh leaf hats for Charlotte and Nettie, and they made leaf cups and saucers to set on their table. Their table was a nice smooth rock. Here's a picture of the swing. Sukie and Rosie, the cows, were turned loose in the woods now to eat the wild grass and the juicy new leaves. There were 2 little calves in the barnyard and 7 little pigs with their mother hog in the pig pen. In the clearing that he made last year, Pa was plowing around the stumps and putting in his crops. One night he came in from work and said to Laura, "What do you think I saw today?" She couldn't guess. "Well," Pa said, "when I was working in the clearing this morning I looked up, and there at the edge of the woods stood a deer. It was a doe, a mommy deer, and guess what she had with her? A baby deer!" Laura and Mary guessed together, clasping their hands. "Yes," Pa said, "her fawn was with her. It was such a pretty little thing, the softest fawn color with big dark eyes. It had tiny feet not much bigger than my thumb and slender little legs and a soft muzzle. It stood there and it looked at me with its large soft eyes, wondering what I was. It was not afraid at all." "You wouldn't shoot a baby deer, would you, Pa?" "Oh, no, never," he answered. "Nor its ma, nor its pa. No more hunting now, until the little wild animals have all grown up. We'll have to do without fresh meat until fall." Pa said that as soon as he had his crops in, they would all go to town. Laura and Mary could go too. They were old enough now. When their curls were done, Ma tied their sunbonnets under their chins. She fastened her collar with the gold pin, and she was putting on her hat when Pa drove up to the gate. He had curried the horses till they shone. He swept the wagon box clean and laid a clean blanket on the wooden seat. Ma and baby Carrie in her arms sat on the wagon seat with Pa, and Laura and Mary sat on a board fastened across the wagon box under the seat. They were very happy as they drove across the springtime woods. Carrie laughed and bounced, and Ma was smiling, and Pa whistled while he drove the horses. The sun was bright and warm on the road. Sweet, cool smells came out of the leafy woods. Rabbits stood up in the road ahead with their little front paws dangling down and their noses twitching, and the sun shone through the tall twitching ears. Then they bounded away with a flash of a little white tail. Twice Laura and Mary saw deer looking at them with their large dark eyes from the shadows among the trees. It was 7 miles to town. The town was called Pepin, and it was on the shore of Lake Pepin. After a long time, Laura began to see glimpses of blue water between the trees. The hard road turned to soft sand. The wagon wheels went deep down in it, and the horses pulled and sweated. Often, Pa stopped to let them rest for a few minutes. Then all at once the road came out of the woods, and Laura saw the lake. It was blue as the sky, and it went to the edge of the world. As far as she could see, there was nothing but flat blue water. Very far away, the sky and the water met, and there was a darker blue line. The sky was large overhead. Laura had never known the sky was so big. There was so much empty space all around her that she felt small and frightened, and glad that Ma and Pa were there. Suddenly the sunshine was hot. The sun was almost overhead in the large empty sky, and the cool woods stood back from the edge of the lake. Even the big woods seemed smaller under so much sky. Pa stopped the horses, and he turned around on the wagon seat. He looked ahead with his whip. "There you go, Laura and Mary," he said. "That's the town of Pepin." Laura stood up on the board, and Pa held her safe by the arm so she could see the town. When she saw it, she could hardly breathe. She knew how Yankee Doodle felt, because he could not see the town because there were so many houses. And here's a picture of the town, and there you can see the lake on the other side here. A little town with a bunch of houses back behind that store. Right on the edge of the lake, there was one great big building. It was the store, Pa told her. It was not made of logs. It was made of wide gray boards running up and down. The sand spread around it. Behind the store there was a clearing, larger than Pa's clearing in the woods at home. Standing among the stumps there were more houses than Laura could count. They were not made of logs. They were made of boards like the store. Laura had never imagined so many houses, and they were so close together. Of course, they were much smaller than the store. One of them was made of new boards that had not time to get gray. It was the yellow color of newly cut wood. People were living in all of these houses. Smoke rose up from their chimneys. Though it was not Monday, some woman had spread out a washing on the bushes and stumps by her house. Several girls and boys were playing in the sunshine in that open space between the store and the houses. They were jumping from one stump to the next stump and shouting. "Well, that's Pepin," Pa said. Laura just nodded her head. She looked and could not say a word. After a while she sat down again, and the horses went on. They left the wagon on the shore of the lake. Pa unhitched his horses, and he tied one to each side of the wagon box. Then he took Laura and Mary by the hand, and Ma came beside them carrying baby Carrie. They walked through the deep sand to the shore. The warm sand came in over the tops of Laura's shoes. There was a wide platform in front of the store, and at one end, steps went up to it out of the sand. Laura's heart was beating so fast she could hardly climb the steps. She was trembling all over. This is the first time she's seen a store. This was the store to which Pa came to trade his furs. When they went in, the storekeeper knew him. The storekeeper came out from behind the counter and spoke to him and Ma, and then Laura and Mary had to show their manners. "How do you do?" said Mary, but Laura was shy and could not say anything. The storekeeper said to Pa and Ma, "Oh, that's a pretty little girl you've got there," and he admired Laura's golden curls. But he did not say anything about Laura or about her curls. They were ugly and brown. The store was full of things to look at. All along one side of it there was shelves with colored prints and calicos. There were beautiful pinks and blues and reds and browns and purples. On the floor along the sides of the plank counters there was a keg of nails and a keg of round gray shot, and there was big wooden pailfuls of candy. There were sacks of salt and sacks of store sugar. In the middle of the store was a plow made of shiny wood with a glittering bright plowshare, and there were steel axe heads and hammer heads and saws and all kinds of knives, hunting knives and skinning knives and butcher knives and jackknives. There were big boots and little boots and big shoes and little shoes. Laura could have looked for weeks and not seen all the things that were in that store. She had not known that there was so many things in the world. Ma and Pa traded for a long time. The storekeeper took down bolts and bolts of beautiful calicoes and spread them out for Ma to finger and look at and price. Laura and Mary looked, but they must not touch. Every new color and pattern was prettier than the last, and there were so many of them. Laura did not know how Ma could ever choose. Ma chose 2 patterns of calico to make shirts for Pa and a piece of brown denim to make him a new jumper. Then she got some white cloth to make sheets and underwear. Pa got enough calico to make Ma a new apron. Ma said, "Oh, no, Charles, I don't really need it." But Pa said that she must pick it out or he would get her the red turkey piece with the big yellow pattern. Well, she smiled and flushed pink, and then she picked out a pattern of rosebuds and leaves on a soft fawn-colored ground. Then Pa got himself a pair of galosses and some tobacco to smoke in his pipe, and Ma got a pound of tea and a little paper package of store sugar to have in the house when company came. It was a pale brown sugar, not dark brown like the maple sugar that Ma used for every day. When all the trading was done, the storekeeper gave Laura and Mary each a piece of candy. They were so astonished and so pleased they just stood looking at their candies. Then Mary remembered and said, "Thank you." Laura could not speak. Everyone was waiting as she could not make a sound. Ma had to ask her, "What do you say, Laura?" Then Laura opened her mouth and gulped and whispered, "Thank you." After that, they went out of the store. Both pieces of candy were white and flat and thin and heart-shaped. There was printing on them in red letters. Ma read it for them. Mary said, "Roses are red, violets are blue. Sugar is sweet, and so are you." Laura said only, "Sweets to the sweet." The pieces of candy were exactly the same size. Laura's printing was larger than Mary's. They all went back through the sand to the wagon on the lake shore. Pa fed the horses on the bottom of the wagon box some oats he had bought for their dinner, and Ma opened the picnic box. They all sat on the warm sand near the wagon and ate bread and butter and cheese and hard-boiled eggs and cookies. The waves of Lake Pepin curled up on the shore at their feet and slid back with the smallest hissing sound. After dinner, Pa went back to the store to talk a while with the other men. Ma sat holding Carrie quietly until she went to sleep, but Laura and Mary ran along the lake shore picking up pretty pebbles that had rolled back and forth by the waves until they were polished smooth. There were no pebbles like that in the big woods. When she found a pretty one, Laura put it in her pocket, and there were so many, each prettier than the last, that she filled her pocket full. And then Pa called, and they ran back to the wagon for the horses to be hitched up, and it was time to go home. Laura was so happy, and she ran through the sand to Pa with all those beautiful pebbles in her pocket. But when Pa picked her up and tossed her up into the wagon, a dreadful thing happened. The heavy pebbles tore the pocket right out of her dress. The pocket fell, and the pebbles rolled all over the bottom of the wagon box. Laura cried because she had torn her best dress. Ma gave Carrie to Pa, and she came quickly to look at the torn place. She said it was all right. "Stop crying, Laura," she said. "I can fix it." She showed Laura that the dress was not torn, nor the pocket. The pocket was a little bag sewn into the seam of the dress skirt and hanging under it. Only the seams had ripped. Ma could sew in the pocket again, as good as new. Now pick up your pebbles, Laura, Ma said, and another time don't be so greedy. So Laura gathered up the pebbles and put them in the pocket and carried the pocket in her lap. She did not mind very much when Pa laughed at her for being such a greedy little girl that she took more than she could carry away. Nothing like that ever happened to Mary. Mary was a good little girl who always kept her dress clean and neat and minded her manners. Mary had lovely golden curls, and her candy heart had a poem on it. Mary looked very good and sweet and unrumpled and clean, sitting on the board beside Laura. Laura did not think this was fair. But it had been a wonderful day, the most wonderful day in her whole life. And she thought about that beautiful lake and the town she had seen and the store full of so many things. She held the pebbles carefully in her lap and her candy heart wrapped in her handkerchief until she got home and could put it away to keep it always. It was too pretty to eat. The wagon jolted along the homeward road through the big woods. The sun set and the woods grew darker, but before the last of the twilight was gone, the moon rose. But they were safe because Pa had his gun. The soft moonlight came down through the treetops and made patches of light and shade on the road ahead, and the horses' hooves made a cheerful clippity-clop. Mary and Laura did not say anything because they were very tired, and Ma sat silently holding baby Carrie, sleeping in her arms. But Pa sang softly, "Mid pleasures and palaces though we may roam, be it ever so humble, there's no place like home." Okay, that's it for that chapter. The next one is called Summertime. And let me see. Oh, this is one where they had some cousins over to visit. So that one should be fun. And I'll see you again later. Bye.